this system really does look incredible. Please work, please. Oh, this is actually at complete max settings, ray tracing ultra. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first build I'm actually filming in 2021, and today we're going to put together what I would describe as the ultimate price performance gaming PC if you're looking at playing at 1440p, maybe even a little bit of 4K. We've got some fantastic components on the desk here today, things like the Ryzen 5600X, the brand new RTX 3070, and all of these things together we're actually going to build a very minute gaming PC, but one that still accommodates loads of hardware and has plenty of room for upgrades. We're going to show you how to put it together and give you the build process, things that are good about it, things that aren't, and of course show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers, so if you are going to build something like this at home, you know exactly what to expect. Are you after a killer new graphics card that doesn't break the bank? Gigabyte's Gaming OC graphics cards are the answers to your prayers. Get next generation performance with NVIDIA RTX ray tracing, super smooth gameplay in the latest titles, and DLSS 2.0 technology for sky-high frame rates. Stay cool and quiet with a triple fan design whilst enjoying mouth-watering clock speeds straight out the box. Up the ante with Gigabyte today. Learn a little bit more with that link down below. The first job is to actually make yourself some room. You're going to need your CPU cooler, your storage, your RAM, your processor, and then the motherboard itself. But the motherboard that we're actually using here today is the B550M. So this is a micro ATX motherboard, and it does go in a smaller micro ATX case. But I think when it comes to bang for buck, there's very little out there that offers such great value, yet still has all of the features that you could possibly want. So we've got support for PCI Generation 4 on both the graphics card and the storage. Turning to the rear I/O, there's pretty much everything that you could want on here. Maybe a couple more USB ports would be nice, but I don't think anyone's going to have any real issues. But the most important thing really, if you're going to follow along and go for a Ryzen 5 or at least a 5th generation Ryzen processor, is that it does actually support updating this BIOS without the need for a previous generation CPU, which is really important, as if you don't have one of these lying around, you'd be a bit stuck. So grab your motherboard and place it on top of the box. Then we can get our CPU, which is indeed the Ryzen 5 5600X. And a lot of people are going to say that the 3600 is going to be the way to go. But as we've seen in games like Cyberpunk, it's not actually enough to properly take advantage of the full next generation performance of the new graphics cards, especially with a 3070. So if you want to not only be future-proof but play really heavy games like Cyberpunk, then I think this strikes the right price to performance balance really, because it's going to give you plenty of performance, but you're not paying for any extra cores that you just don't need for gaming. It's worth remembering that you do actually get a CPU cooler in the box if you want to save yourself a little bit of money. There is absolutely nothing wrong with using that. You can upgrade it later and it's free. And if you look very carefully, you can actually see this gold arrow on top of the CPU, and you want to line this up with the one that's on the motherboard. So just lift this little lever, find the arrow on the motherboard, and then just drop it down, lower down that lever to secure it into place, and then you should have a CPU that on this particular board is sort of facing the rear I/O. And obviously it doesn't fall out. If it did, you'd be in trouble. Big trouble. I'm definitely not advocating that as the test, okay? Probably the easiest thing to install is actually the RAM. And believe it or not, I think this is probably my favorite RAM on the market today, because it's from Crucial, it's the Ballistics, and it's very similar actually to Corsair's Vengeance Pro, but it's noticeably shorter, which if you're using certain air coolers, like we are going to do today, then you'll find that it's just going to fit a little bit more snugly underneath them, and in theory you're not going to have to move any fans or anything around. Here we're using a 16GB kit, and this is running at 3600 MHz. To install, it's really easy, just use slots 2 and slots 4, and then line up the little notches until you can push it down. There's only one right way of doing this, and it should click once it's in place. Next up is going to be the thing that is potentially controversial, is going to get a few comments out there, because this does support PCI Generation 4 storage, but that is quite expensive. It's not ridiculous, but it's a lot more. So we're actually going to go for one of the cheaper NVMe SSDs you can get. This is the Crucial P2. It's a 500GB version. So it's not going to store a huge amount of games, but obviously you can get a larger capacity. But this is way faster than a SATA SSD, and assuming you can get this at the right price, it's pretty much the same price as a SATA SSD. So it's a no-brainer, it's just not as fast as Gen 4, which isn't really going to matter today, but in the future it might. So you might want to upgrade your whole rig in the future as well. Yes, we've lowered the bar on this channel. I leave the burps in now. Are you happy? Maybe I shouldn't film this directly after lunch. Very important thing to note is that we are going to use this Lightning M.2 Gen port on the top, which is the only one that supports Gen 4 SSDs. So if you do upgrade this in the future, then obviously move this to the other slot, because otherwise you're going to run into slower speeds, and chances are you wouldn't really know why. Just take your little M.2 shield off. Don't forget to peel this backing off, otherwise you won't be getting the benefits of all of the thermal compound. There's only one right way of doing this so that the notch lines up, and then you can just push it down and screw and secure it into place. At this point, you've probably seen some videos from Geekawatt that will tell you to move on and put this into your case. He is wrong. He is not a professional like myself. Now is the time to actually put your cooler onto the motherboard, or if you're using like a radiator or something, mount the hardware onto the board now and then fix it later, as it just makes it so much easier. Geekawatt, I'm coming for you, boy. I know where you live. I do actually know where he lives. I've been to his house, okay? We're actually great friends behind the scenes. We're definitely not in a big competition. I'm very intrigued by the cooler that we have here today. This is the AS500, or the AS500 as I prefer to call it, because it costs around about £50 actually, so they should have called it the AS50, would have made more sense. But I think for our processor it is going to give us plenty of thermal headroom, means that it's going to be quiet, and if you do want to overclock a little bit, it should be fine. You have these tiny little like double-ended screw spacer type things. These just attach to the back plate that comes pre-applied to your motherboard. This just raises up the socket a little bit. Then you can grab these little plates and just attach those, or at least hook them over those screws that you've just put down. A question I think I get asked in most builds is always about thermal paste. How do you apply it? Do you need to apply it? And the answer is that with this particular system you do, because it comes not pre-applied, you get it in this little tube. So we just apply a very small pea-sized amount in the middle. The important thing, as boring as it sounds, is just to read your cooler instruction manual, because there's definitely been times I've done it wrong, not only in terms of thermal paste, but in terms of like a couple of the screws or something, and then you find that it doesn't fit properly. It will really affect your thermals. I promise you guys, you need to read the manual. Read it. There's a couple more screws to put down just to secure the bracket into place. Remove the fan from your CPU cooler. It won't actually go on otherwise. Then just lower it down until those little screws actually line up, and then you can use your trusty screwdriver to fix it down. I'll spin it round so you can actually see this next bit. You want to grab your fan, make sure that the hooks are actually attached properly, and lower this down so that it is actually covering all of the heatsink. Let's not get carried away though, as there is one more step, and that's to actually plug in this fan, or obviously it won't do anything, is this little 4-pin header, and it says CPU fan on it. Let's put our motherboard to one side and grab our case, and this is, I believe, the MACUBE, or the MACUBE, was it the CL110? Wait. It's called the MACUBE 110. Why is it with every single company at the moment trying to do a 110? Are they trying to steal like some of Corsair's market? MSI now have a 110, Deepcore have a 110. Is the Corsair 110R really that popular? Maybe, but this is actually a very different case. I really like it. And right off the bat, you probably noticed that the cooling on the front is pretty much non-existent because it is a solid panel. There are some air gaps, pretty similar really to those that you'll find on NZXT cases. So it's going to be more silence optimized, but it's not going to have the absolute best airflow possible. But I think for what we're building here today, it should work absolutely fine. It doesn't look as if we have USB-C on the top of the case, which is a shame, but it does bring the price down a little bit. You don't get many fans either with this, so you're going to have to add your own. But they do have the absolute best doors, I think, in the business. You just lower this magnetic tab and then it pulls off. And when you want to put it back on, just do the inverse really. Easy as that. So not really that much stuff going on around the back here. It does make it nice and lightweight, but it's not really that exciting, is it? Here's this little lonely fan that we have at the back. I'm going to move this to the front so this can actually give our graphics card some nice air. And then for the rest of the fans, we're going to use these, some MF120 GTs. You can see from the back, they look like pretty standard RGB fans. But then on the front, you have this little X bar with some more RGB on it. And actually, they're going to look pretty good from both sides. It's not like the Hue 2 fans that look good from one side, but not really great on the other. It's just you get a very different look on the front. You do also get this little adapter as well, so if you're maybe running an RTX motherboard, you can actually get, what's that, 4 fans just from a single header. That's pretty cool. I guess you could say it's pretty deep cool. No, even for me, that's pretty bad. X quite literally marks the spot with these particular fans though, because you can see exactly what way the air is blowing. If you can see the X, then the air is going to be blowing away from you, whereas if you can see the plain side, then it's going to blow towards you. Grab your motherboard, and assuming that you've actually installed it properly, you can grab it by the CPU cooler, then just place it in so that all of the little standoffs actually line up with the holes on the motherboard, and then you can screw it down. Oh, Deepcool, why? Why would you put all of the screws in the same bag? Come on, that's not very clever. Not happy about that. Once you've done that, it should look something along the lines of this. All of these cables that dangle down do need to go into the motherboard. So you've got your USB 3 here. We've got, what's this? Is this HD audio? Yes, HD audio. Sometimes you have a USB as well that looks very similar, but don't get them confused. Then here we have our reset switch, and we have our HDD LED, and somewhere, there it is, we have our power switch, the most important one. We do of course have our fan headers as well for the 3 fans that we've just installed and the case fan. They look very similar, but some of them will have 3 pins, some of them will have 4. And then on the front, you should find that you have a little fan header here, here, and here. HD audio is located all the way at the left on the motherboard over here. Our power switch, reset, and HD LED is in this little block here. If you're not sure which ones to plug it in, I would highly advise checking out your motherboard manual, as you're less likely to make mistakes. Just above it, we have our USB 3, this very big black cable here. Then we also have USB-C that we're not using, but if you were, is this little silver connector here. If you're following along at home, you've probably noticed we also have these little weird connections with these little hooks. These are actually our RGB connections, and you just plug each one into the hub. We're getting there, don't you worry. Now it's time for our power supply, and this is the C750. 750 watts, I think for this graphics card is probably the right sort of balance. You'll probably be able to get away with 650, to be honest. I wouldn't hesitate to do that personally. But if you're buying a new power supply, it doesn't really make sense to sell yourself short. For the sake of 100 watts, this is a really trusty, reliable power supply. It's very quiet in operation, and it's not a cheap one, but it's certainly not expensive either. Well, it might be at the moment. Things are quite difficult to buy if you haven't already noticed, but you've probably told me in the comments. So you're going to need to grab our CPU. It does say CPU on it. Then you have your PCIe. You have this absolutely huge 24-pin motherboard RTX. You can't miss it, it's gigantic. And then most builds will need one of these, which is like a trail of SATA cables. These are usually used for things like hard drives or SATA SSDs, but quite often if you get RGB or RGB fans, you'll need one of these. But actually we don't with our particular build, because it's all powered from the motherboard. Happy days. I didn't really look very happy there, did I? Happy days. You need to place this downwards in this particular case, and most of them are the same. Grab your screwdriver and then just fix it in place with the larger screws that you get with your case. Grab the almighty girth and plug this into the slot. Then do the same with the CPU, which is this little 8-pin up here. Here we have the RTX 3070. This is MSI's Gaming X Trio, and I want to be explicitly clear about this one. If you can get this for a great price, then this is a great product. But like a lot of the more oversized cooling solutions, on a 3070, it's not essential. So if you find that you're paying a load more money for this and you're not really fussed about the looks, then it's not really worth that investment. But fortunately, I've seen these for some good prices. I've also seen these for some terrible prices. So as always, use your head, and if you can get the Founders Edition for a fair bit cheaper than this, that's what I would do. But then again, the Gaming X Trio looks pretty good. It's just got that weird light bar on the top that's very love it or hate it. I forget how huge it is though every single time. I mean, look at that. I assume it is actually going to fit in here. I didn't check that. Or just. You do get some PCIe slot covers that you're going to want to take out, and these are, as you do get on cheaper cases, not actually reusable. They just bend into oblivion. Grab your triple slot monster and then carefully click it into place. Don't forget to screw it down so that it's nice and secure. Neaten it up, and then I think that is pretty much our completed rig. Looking pretty snazzy if I say so myself. Definitely very simple. I mean, there's not that much going on here, but it does let the internals speak for themselves, because we've got a very sort of jet black design here. So all of the focus is on the stuff that you actually want to see, like the CPU cooler, like the graphics card. It's a very good looking bit of kit. Let's get this system turned on then and actually see if it works. Remember that we are actually expecting it not to boot properly because we haven't flashed that BIOS yet, but I've heard some boards can do this, so we'll have to wait and see. Moment of truth time then. We have some power, fans are looking great. I'm going to assume that it's not going to work. So this is the nerve-wracking bit. You grab your little USB drive, you put it in the grey port that's labelled as Flash BIOS. Make sure that you do actually have power to this, of course, and then press that Flash BIOS button. So you get a little light on the back, and that's now doing its thing, and as soon as that goes out, we should be ready to rock and roll. Just in case you haven't seen one before though, it's a flashing red light, look, there you go. Are we now ready? Are we going to see a lovely MSI screen plop up, or are we going to be flailing on the floor crying my eyes out? Come on, will it on? Please work, please, please. Oh, yes! Genuine excitement.exe. I promise. Woo! I like to enable XMP straight out of the box, as it means that our RAM will actually run at its full 3600 MHz speed, and then make sure every fan is actually put in this smart mode, and you essentially just create yourself a little curve so that it's not making noise when the system isn't hot. Then we can grab our Windows drive, or our Windows stick, insert it in, restart again, and it will take you through and do everything you need to know, really. I'm going to have a cup of tea, maybe a coffee, I'll get the games downloading, and we'll rejoin in just a second. Except it will be like an hour and a half. Hello everybody, and welcome to our completed system in all of its glory. We've got our games installed and we're ready to rock and roll. So here we have Destiny 2 running at absolute max settings. This is on a 4K monitor in 4K. Yes, it is the start of the game. I didn't realise that your saves didn't carry across because they've moved it to Steam, so I've lost everything and it's really frustrating. But it does still show you that in terms of frame rate, bearing in mind that this is a 3070, so it's not even the best graphics card you can get, I think around about 80 to 100 frames a second, max settings 4K, is certainly nothing to be sniffed at now, is it? If you're more of a 1440p gamer, then you can see you're going to get around about 144 frames a second. It is obviously going to depend on the exact bit of the game that you're in, but I mean, Destiny is actually pretty consistent, I think, from start to finish, really. Let's stick with the whole competitive theme though, and go for something that's more my style, Apex Legends. You know I'm good because I've got the skins. Skins make you a better gamer, obviously. I am Jumpmaster, so let's go down into Olympus, and we have, what's that, around about 96 frames a second. So actually pretty similar to Destiny. I guess I wasn't really expecting that. They're very different art styles, but they're both very good looking games. It has reduced ever so slightly now that we're actually down on Olympus, which is a little bit unusual. It didn't actually happen on the old map. It was the other way around, but still 80 frames a second is way above that magic 60, and of course bearing in mind this is running at max settings. If you do want more FPS at 4K, just turn some of the settings down a bit. At 1440p Quad HD, you are actually getting around about 50% more FPS. So you can see why a lot of people choose to go for 1440p over 4K. It does make a huge difference for something like Apex. So 144 frames a second, you're pretty much going to max out most monitors, really. And for anyone that's already moaned in the comments about the lack of airflow that you get on this case, just check out our temperatures. You can see there is nothing to worry about at all. 69 degrees on the CPU, 65 on the GPU. I have to say though that this system really does look incredible. I wasn't actually expecting it to look quite this good. I mean, usually with air coolers they block the RAM. This MSI lighting bar I'm not a huge fan of, but when you have it all together it looks absolutely fantastic. Oh, let's bring this PC to its knees though, shall we, with some Cyberpunk. We'll start with the good news, which is that this is actually at complete max settings, ray tracing ultra, and you can see it does run. This is with DLSS set to performance mode, so you can notice that it's definitely not quite as good looking as we'd like, to be honest, and the frame rate is only around about 32 frames a second. But let's try and get a proper frame rate though, so let's change the DLS to balanced. We go to 1440p in the video options. Moment of truth time, we're getting, what's that, around about 60 frames a second. Probably slightly less, yes, about 50, 52. But to be honest, for Cyberpunk, that is quite acceptable, and it is such a good looking game, it would be a shame to sort of miss out and not get the absolute best out of it. So I'm going to remove reflections, turn off the RTX lighting, but leave the shadows, as I think this is very noticeable, and you can see our frame rate then skyrockets to around about, well, maybe not skyrockets, it goes up to 70 frames a second, which I think is going to be the sweet spot for a lot of people. An RTX 3080 doesn't make sense in a whole lot of games, to be honest. It's definitely overkill, but for Cyberpunk I think it's better to have as much horsepower as possible. This is Jedi Fallen Order. This is running at absolute max settings, which is the epic preset, and this is actually running at 4K, and with a controller, apparently the way it's supposed to be played, you can see we're getting over that 60 FPS mark once again with around about 72. So then, there we go, our completed system that's all about price to performance. And I'll start with the case. I think for £40, as it's currently priced here in the UK, this offers tremendous value for money. The most important thing though is of course that gaming performance, and this is the thing I'm most happy about really when it comes to this rig, because all of that money is being pumped straight into the graphics card, into that Ryzen processor, so it's not only going to give you fantastic performance now, but it should last for a very long time as well. The NVMe SSD is perfectly good for any gaming PC, and if that changes in the future, well, you've got a spare slot, just move that one down, put your Gen 4 in the top, happy days. Let me know your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. Are you as happy with it as I am? I actually sort of want to do some water cooling or something with this case. I think it's asking for something a little bit more. Smash that like button if you've enjoyed this video. It honestly helps out so much you really wouldn't believe. Get subscribed for more videos just like this, and if you want to see some other builds, maybe bigger ones, cheaper ones, more expensive, you can find those in the end screen. And of course, don't forget, if you do want to check out current pricing on any of the parts featured, you can find those linked down in the description below with my Amazon affiliate links. And of course, while you're down there, don't forget to check out Gigabyte's Gaming OC graphics cards. Available in a wide range of GPUs, this triple fan Windforce cooler has you covered. It's a card that's not only able to deliver next generation visuals and frame rates, but one that's able to stay cool and quiet under full load. Give your PC the love it deserves with Gigabyte Gaming OC. Level up your experience today with that link down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you around in the next one, and until then, goodbye.